Good evening. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think we have everybody here. Dave Berger is on the phone, so I think he's already with us. So we'll go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, and the flag is right back there. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's move on to the school board meeting norms on your electronic page 2. Amber.
Be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you. Let's move on to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Dr. Brenner, do you have any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Can we get a motion and a second? Motion by Cynthia and second by Bill. Any questions or comments about the agenda? Was it Josh? Was you? Oh, I'm sorry. Correct the minutes. It was Josh that seconded that. So, assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Sorry, Dave, I didn't wait for you. Well, let's move on to item 3, which is celebrating success. And we have Principal Bilden and a very distinguished group out there that's going to talk to us. So this is going to be pretty exciting. Thank you all for being here.
Good evening. School board members, Dr. Brenner, and district administration. My name is Sherry Bilden. As you probably know, I'm the principal out at Twining on the Grand Forks Air Force Base. And it's my pleasure to be here this evening with some of our staff members to highlight some special happenings that have been going on at Twining. As you know, Twining is the only K-8 building in the district where we currently have 330 students, of which 100% are military or military connected. Because of these dynamics, this has opened doors for Twining to apply for DODEA grants and to actively engage our parents and community to support career readiness standards for our students. So with me tonight, I have Elizabeth Berger. She's our instructional design coach, as well as our new grant, FIT grant coordinator, Danica Smith. She is our literacy specialist and data steward. Melissa Port, middle school math and project lead the way instructor, and Alicia Pape, our first grade teacher, as well as a team leader. When we first met to discuss what we wanted to share with you all, focus was placed on 4 areas. We are going to share tonight innovation, curriculum implementation, our elective options, and our school culture. And we're each going to take a portion of this and talk about all the things that are happening.
Sorry. Innovation. What are the things that make Twining innovative? Because of our Project Heroes DODEA grant that we were awarded in FY20, we were able to hire Kathy Cute as our STEM specialist. She works in our STEM lab and workshop full-time. Some of her duties include taking care of all the STEM equipment and preparing materials for Project Lead the Way FOSS Science. She is also a robotics leader and will work with our Girls Who Code club this spring. Her role is integral to the success of our grant. This grant has created leaders in all of our teachers at Twining. Jennifer Variano is one of them. She was instrumental in getting our 5th grade robotics team up and running, and Kathy and Jen are now leading 5th through 8th grade robotics team and look forward to competing soon. As you can see, our STEM specialist, Kathy Cute, is assisting the students with their demonstration during the conclusion of STEM Day last spring. With the funds from this grant, we were able to hold a STEM Day at Twining last April. We invited STEM professionals from the field, community members, parents, school leaders, and base leadership to this special event. The community involvement for this event was unbelievable. Here are a few of our middle school activities that we held at STEM Day. Some examples of stations that middle school took part in were a heart rate station where we had students use stethoscopes to measure their heart rates after various movement activities. We're fortunate enough to have some nurses to help us out with this station. Middle school students also had the opportunity to build helicopters. One of our Twining parents is a helicopter pilot and helped lead this session. Throughout the life of the grant, we will strive to connect our STEM learning to a career field. Here's a picture of our elementary students at the Build a Boat and Build a Bridge activities. I'm sure you can see how engaged our students and volunteers are through these pictures. Here are more pictures of our STEM Day. This year, we will be holding our second annual STEM Day on February 24th as a part of Engineering Week. We believe that we are innovative in the area of professional development as well. We've trained all of our K-5 teachers in Project Lead the Way launch training. Math and Movement Professional Development was also held last spring for our K-5 and middle school math teachers. And 2 of our middle school teachers have taken 3 Project Lead the Way Gateway module training sessions. The Project Lead the Way FOSS Summer Integration Project paid teachers to dive into their FOSS curriculum and see where Project Lead the Way and FOSS could work together. And last spring, a group of teachers were able to travel to a STEM conference and brought back innovative ideas that they have incorporated into their teaching. In addition to all of these wonderful opportunities Project Heroes has enabled us to do, we are the recipient of another $500,000 DODEA grant called Project Fit. Fitness integration at Twining has 2 goals, student wellness and teacher wellness. We are in the early stages of planning professional development for that project. Our first training will be held this spring and focus on the big picture. Why is incorporating movement so important? We'll be inviting teachers, paras, base board members, base leaders, and PTO members to the first training. Because of the grant funding, we'll be adding a fitness room that has extra gaming equipment for staff and students. And we've ordered furniture for a teacher collaboration space and standing desks for our middle school students, just to name a few of the items that will be available for our students and teachers.
Next, we'll share our success with curriculum implementation and how we use data to reinforce our curriculum. To implement curriculum effectively, staff are not only provided support from the district, but also at our building level. Staff are supported by the principal, instructional design coach, literacy specialist, and each other. We each have created a culture of working together to help one another succeed and ultimately our students succeed. Using our core curricular resources such as Benchmark Advanced, Really Great Reading, and Wit and Wisdom with Fidelity, teachers have seen noticeable gains in the classroom. At Twining, over the past few years, we have centered our conversations around data. Our data drives how we teach at the building level, classroom level, and the intervention level. We hold bi-weekly data meetings between the principal, instructional design coach, and literacy specialist, and monthly grade level data meetings that also include classroom teachers. Data is not only being discussed formally with our staff, but it's also driving conversations through our building on a regular basis. At Twining, we've also added additional 2 data points to where our students take the STAR Computer Adaptive Tests in March and November. These are in addition to the required fall, winter, and spring assessment windows. Up here we have our results from our November assessment. Teachers also have chosen a specific curriculum-based measure to track through the year. We also desegregate this data by grade level as well as by race. We look at the overall proficiency and factor in the enrollment. This data drives our Tier 1 teaching in reading and math, as well as our targeted literacy blocks and interventions as necessary. At the middle school level, we have implemented a 90-minute curriculum literacy block to cover English language arts, as well as a time at the end of each day for students to receive interventions as needed. In doing so, we have seen several students move from the at-risk category to the on-target category in STAR.
So because of this grant, we were able to offer quite a few unique electives for our middle school students. 2 of those being Project Lead the Way modules of Medical Detectives in Flight and Space. As the facilitator of the class, I was allowed to choose what modules I wanted, and I was proud to choose these 2. So we started with Flight and Space. Flight and Space is a class that is offered every other year along with Medical Detectives. That way our students are able to take both classes and learn about both of the materials. So Flight and Space was chosen because of the unique relation it has to our military students and families. Students learn about the different aspects of flight, how airplanes fly, and what it takes for astronauts to make it to space and live in space. They also get to design a rover to land on Mars, make a space-friendly greenhouse, and create a workout plan, and even try some space food. Medical Detectives was also chosen to offer students insight on the health careers and medical careers route. Not many middle school classes are focused on health careers and medical careers. Students throughout this module participate in activities that require them to diagnose patients using only medical files, even interview live patients, which we had teachers and staff come in for them to do that. They got to dissect sheep brains this last week, and they will eventually solve a pandemic-sized outbreak. And then as the facilitator for Medical Detectives as of right now, I want students to be able to have opportunities to learn about different medical careers that they may not think of when they hear medical careers. Things other than doctors and nurses and things like that. So I try and bring in a guest speaker once a month to talk about different medical careers. So we had EMTs come in, paramedics. One of our staff members is a mortician. So she came in and talked about the different aspects of that. And I'm also planning a field trip for next month to go to the UND School of Medicine so they can talk to some grad students about their role and things that go along at UND.
Along with providing different innovative electives, we also want to balance by incorporating the arts through theater, drama, and musicals. This is also unique in that it does not only provide students with the ability to learn more about acting and performing, but it also behind-the-scenes work to make a music production successful. As you can see, Mrs. Marge Myrold and Mrs. Melanie Craig, they magically transform our middle school gym into a performance hall. So we're very thankful for all the extra efforts that they go into providing these wonderful experiences for our students.
We're talking about our school culture. What are the things that make Twining school culture special? First of all, we do staff versus students, where they get to play, the staff and the students get to play against each other in some kind of athletic event. So most recently, volleyball. And they do basketball, but not only do they do staff versus students, but during some of our assemblies, they are able to, everyone, so every grade will get to partake in some of these activities in front of the entire school, and they have a lot of fun with that. They're always, every time there's an assembly, they're like, I wonder what game it is this time. We also dress up. This is mostly our middle school staff, so dress up days are not a just primary thing at Twining, it's a whole group effort. Our staff often have more than one role at Twining, knowing that we are a smaller school and a smaller middle school. Middle school wears a lot of hats. We have strong family support. They're constantly asking to volunteer and contribute. Lists fill up really quickly if you send something out looking for people to help. Some of my classroom, sorry, this is hard. Some of my classroom parents, just specifically during some of those like more celebratory times of the year, they reach out to me and say, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I can do just to come in the classroom? Which is really amazing. We have awesome military support, which we have seen on some of the other slides. We have the SMILE program that is part of elementary and middle school. Our elementary students are paired up with our middle school students, and they're able to come together and enjoy activities together, and then those middle school students will come down and they'll help them pack up for the day and be their buddy. We have yours and student leadership, but like the main thing to me is that we have many social gatherings outside of school. This is not new for Twining. This has been generations and generations, veteran teachers, teachers that are not teaching anymore. It is a known thing that between Eielson and between Twining, this has been a normal thing that our staff gets together, and they are best friends. This year we had Friendsgiving together, and everyone brought their own Thanksgiving dishes, and everyone is allowed to enjoy. Everyone is invited. We have birthday socials, so every month, different parts of the school get together and they plan a meal for everyone for lunch to celebrate those birthdays monthly. And then teams, which perfectly fits with Twining Elementary and Middle School. The HRS framework has provided guidance, structure, and empowered staff to support the overall culture. Most of all, acknowledge now many amazing things our school was already doing. As we continue through the process, we review the current practices in a way to sustain and improve our work. I think I'm going to stop there.
And these are some more different team building activities that we have our staff doing. This is one of our early dismissal days where they had to collaboratively work together. I can't remember the actual game at this point, but they had to work with a partner, and they were just having so much fun. I did tell Mrs. Myrold I'm putting that picture in on the right, so she was okay with that. Having lots of fun. So I'd like to continue here with just a little bit of a summary. As Elizabeth alluded to this conference earlier in the presentation, a group of teachers were fortunate to travel to Florida for the ITEEA conference. At this conference, collaboration with STEM teachers and presenters from across the country took place, as well as connections that were made with our state leaders through the North Dakota Technology Engineering Educators Association. Because of this opportunity and what others have learned about our school, Twining was nominated for a STEM Program Excellence Award. Awesome news. We were awarded. Twining Elementary Middle School was awarded the International Technology and Engineering Educators Association Elementary Program Excellence Award for North Dakota. This award recognizes the quality of the technology and engineering education and STEM program provided in schools. We received congratulatory greetings from North Dakota Technology and Engineering Educators Association, as well as Valley City State University. They continue to want to partner with us and continue the growth that we are experiencing and want to keep that and sustain. I have teachers Tiffany Dahlquist, Melissa Port, and Jen Veriano. They will be attending the ITEEA conference in Minneapolis. So we're very fortunate that this national conference is closer in Minneapolis and will receive the award on behalf of Twining at the awards ceremony. So as we come to an end, It has been a pleasure to be here this evening to share a bit about our innovative practices, our curriculum integrations, our elective options, and our collaborative and positive culture. These factors promote and support all learning styles and career readiness standards. Before I do close, this is collaborative, right? I mean, everything we do is team, and the staff at Twining has been more than willing to buy into the professional development because they see the high engagement through their students. I have to say, I walked into the STEM lab this fall, and there were close to 50 kindergartners. Now picture this, 5-year-olds, they were sitting up on their knees, anxious to do the lessons for that day, and they were in there for almost 2 hours, and there was not, for me, a discipline issue, which was wonderful, but having highly engaged students that were eager to write, to practice, to edit, to build, to work together, it was an absolute wonderful experience. But because of this, we can't do this alone. So some shout outs that I would like to give tonight in the innovation area, especially, is to Eric Ripley. Eric has provided us direction on quality professional development and the necessary technology to fully implement a successful STEM program. We couldn't do these things without people like Eric. Eric led us down the Project Lead the Way program, high, top-notch professional development. It's absolutely amazing, so we're very fortunate. His insight and vision was crucial to Twining as we ventured down this new path, and we're happy to continue those relations with him. Tanya Schleicher, rock star, right? Again, she's an amazing grant writer. She keeps us accountable, those checks and balances, but I truly believe that's why we were awarded that second grant, because she is so, she makes sure that we follow those grant guidelines and is in compliance and does an amazing job with us. One area that I don't think gets enough attention, personally, is curriculum implementation. Amy Barch. Amy has not only provided resources that support today's learners, but also the important professional development for teachers to implement the curriculum with fidelity. It's not, let's buy the curriculum and say, good luck, I hope this works for you. There's consistent follow-up, and her work is truly amazing in our district. And I said, you know, when you do these, when you follow the curriculum and the process with fidelity, our data shows it, and we appreciate all the work that she does and provides us. I'm almost done. Elective options. One thing I would like to share is, like Alicia had stated, staff at Twining do wear many hats. I just want to give you an example. Sometimes when I'm asked, how many FTEs do you need? It's kind of a trick question, because my math teacher also teaches a Project Lead the Way class. My choir instructor is also our innovations and math instructor. Our social studies teacher also teaches CTE classes, and my English instructor at the middle school level has now taken on half a day of middle school instructional coaching. So the willingness to wear all these hats is truly amazing, and we're very fortunate to have these people. In closing, we would love to have you attend Twining's annual STEM Day. It's February 24th, and we would love for you to see firsthand the experiences that our students are involved in. And I truly want to thank you for this opportunity this evening to share what we're doing at Twining.
Thank you. Brandon, do you mind turning on the lights? Do you have room for one more student? Because as a audiovisual technician, I failed miserably because there was only one set of lights I tried to turn off, and I couldn't even find those. So I need some remedial work on AV stuff, I think. So no, thank you all. That was wonderful. Clarifying questions, comments from board members. Monty, go ahead.
Well, thank you, ladies. It was wonderful. So I had the opportunity to teach out at Twining 1 year, and it's wonderful out there. And I would just say, I don't know that you even complimented yourselves enough. The culture in that building, having never taught at Twining and going out later in my teaching career and kind of knowing people but never really been out there, I was so accepted right away by you, Sherry, and everybody else. And I have a feeling that that's how you treat everybody. And the students were amazing because they have this world full of experience that experiences, right? And so it is just absolutely a different place to teach. And hats off to you all for winning that award and implementing STEM and STEAM in your building. That is not an easy task. So kudos to you, and I bet the kiddos love it. So thank you very much.
Other comments? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing all your great news. Appreciate that. I do have a couple clarifying questions. One, I think I should know the answer to. Project Lead the Way, is that only at the base?
So our middle school and high schools would have those opportunities as well, but as far as the elementary program, yes. There aren't many schools in the state of North Dakota that are elementary involved in the STEM like we are. Like I said, we wouldn't have been able to do all of this without that wonderful grant. And again, that military, 100% military or military connected really gave us a lot of points on the rubric for qualifying for that grant.
And I have a couple. And the grant, you called it a DODEA, so that's the Department of Defense, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I appreciate that. Thank you. My other question, and then I do have just one comment. My other question is, in the on the star reading chart, a little bit low there for Black students in particular.
It is, yep. So that's something that, Dr. Lewis has led our district in acknowledging, and that's something that we're acknowledging at Twining and that we make a point to talk about at Twining. So being that it's up there and shared with you all is letting you know that we are acknowledging it, and that is something we are working towards at our school.
Remind us, though, how many students attend both, just so, because I think the number.
330 students K through 8.
So my comment is unrelated to both of those things, and here's my comment. Too bad, I think it's a missed opportunity that we didn't talk to Twining when we were doing the K through 5, 6 through 8 model over here on the north end. Because what did you tell us? You told us that middle school students, right, it was middle school students who work with elementary students. And one of the comments that I've heard in the community when we did that K through 5, 6 through 8 with 2 separate schools but combined is that the middle school students would have been a bad influence. And so I think we missed an opportunity by not highlighting this fantastic collaborative work that you're doing. So you certainly, why don't you, I'll put it into a question. Can you comment a little bit more about that, how that works with middle school students and K through 5 students?
And Sherry, maybe you can add it, what you actually did when we were doing that proposal for Valley.
Right, so I was a part of that, Cynthia, at that point. And sometimes it's a little probably unnerving when it's like we don't know what we don't know, right? My history is a K through 12 building, so I'm only, when I went through to a K-8 such as Twining, it was very familiar for me and very comfortable. The way our building is structured is that the front of the facility is our K through 5, and then as you walk towards the rear of the building, that's where we have our common areas, where we have our music department, our lunchroom. Then we start to get into our middle school classes where there's CTE, and then our 2-story in the back where they have their academic areas. So there's very little opportunity for students to interact with one another during the school day. It's really only when there's structured opportunities. So, we did have an assembly on Friday of last week, and so then we come together and we celebrate success as a building, which is wonderful. And the older students, they're role models for our younger children. And so this year we started a SMILE program in which we did discuss where we do have our older students acting almost like a big brother or big sister to our younger students. And we have students that are parents are saying, yes, we would love this because this is something their children are lacking, is that sibling and that connection. And so we do provide that as well, but it's all heavily supervised. And we feel really good about, putting those kids together because we want to make sure that our parents know, too, that they're always supervised. And we have numerous adults in there as the students interacting. And it's good for both the younger child and the middle school child to be that role model and then to learn from an older student. It's awesome. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Catherine?
I just want to thank everybody who's here tonight. Your presentation was amazing, but I also need to give a shout out to the person who's giving the accolades to everybody else, and that's Ms. Principal Bilden here. All of this, none of this would really have happened if it was not her vision, and I think those around the table here recognize that, but I think it's really important for the community to recognize that as well. Clearly, there's a team of creative people who came together to kind of flesh out that vision, but I know that Sherry is the one who originally said, oh my goodness, what an opportunity. Here's how it can meet the needs of our kids. Here are the people we need to get to the table, and the excitement and enthusiasm showed by that leader is what allowed all this to occur. So I just want to say thank you, Ms. Bilden.
Go ahead.
It's hard to have words after that because it's truly a team. I feel that. I just want Tanya to be ready for the next grant that we're ready to write, because that's on Mrs. Berger. She's already saying, we got the email. And I'm like, oh. So.
I always love when Twining comes to present, because I'm a Thunderbird alumni. So it's interesting how 20 years later, the culture hasn't changed. Even as a student there, you could see the dynamic of the staff and teachers. So kudos to you all for carrying that tradition on. I am not certain that I know what, if anything, happens in the summer in terms of summer programming. I don't know if you guys have the capacity to do that, but I know childcare can be an issue, and the proximity from the base to town could be an issue for some people. So do you have any summer activities at the school, or do you have summer school or other options available?
Very good question. We do have our summer reading and math programs at Twining, and Kevin Onstead was wonderful to get that math program out at Twining, because we did have students enroll in town, and it can be a little bit of a hardship to travel to town. We did house or host this first STEM summer camp, but it was really difficult because of no air conditioning, and it was very hot. And so we've been fortunate to continue with that in town, so that STEM camp can continue here. But and then we have at times have had the SPA program too, based on the interest levels of our students. So those are some of the things that we're able to offer.
Just a request, and then a question. I'm really intrigued by the difference in the students of color versus the non-students, because I would assume it's a more homogeneous socioeconomic group out there than compared to downtown. So I'm really interested. So if you have any data, research, articles, whatever, just email them to me. I would appreciate looking at that. My question is, and this sounds tongue-in-cheek, but I'm actually serious about it. Have you thought about, in the students versus staff, exploring the arts rather than just sports? Choir, band, a contest, or maybe a combined little concert or something non-athletic wise. So.
I think that's a great idea. No, I really love that idea. It's usually our athletic department that schedules and organizes this event, but I think that would be awesome. We have a lot of singers that like to partake.
We do have.
Yeah.
Oh, here, come here.
Teachers were.
Come up. Yep.
Last year, us teachers were brought into the band to play some of the songs and the anthem, and that was interesting. And then they also brought in the high school kids that had initially been at Twining for this too. So it was middle school teachers and high school coming in to participate during some of our assemblies.
Well, I think it's just good examples that for students that they don't just go on to be adult, basketball players for church league and stuff like that. They go on to arts and music and theater and those kinds of things as well. Any final questions, thoughts? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I just have to say, one of their slides showed their choir, Marge. I mean, she's a fantastic musician, and she was very athletic in that photo.
Well, thank you all. We really appreciate this presentation, and best of luck. And we'll try and see how many we can get out there on February 24th. Thank you. Let's move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes, electronic pages 35 through 38, the January 9th minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second? Motion by Bill, we have a second. Second by Joel. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Let's move on to item 6, which is superintendent's recommendations for discussion. 6A is public comments on LEA return to in-person instruction plan. It's on electronic pages 39 through 46. Catherine.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. Good evening again, members of the board. As Dr. Lund described, I'm here today to both update you and field any sort of public commentary, though it looks like a little slim pickings here tonight, on our ongoing Return to Learn plan. Just as a reminder, the genesis for this plan came during the crux of COVID and COVID-19 related response systems that we've had to build into our school system to make sure that our employees and our students and our families remain safe. And per DPI instruction, we are required to update this plan every 6 months and to evaluate it for to make sure that it's still applicable, to make sure that we are still being nimble and responding to student and staff needs on the heels of the pandemic. And so what I intend to do is just kind of walk you through some of the critical contents, including highlighting the changes. I will go relatively quickly because I know you have seen this before. Hi, Ryan. And please interrupt me as we go. So on page 42 of your electronic packet, I want to call your attention just to the very last sentence there, which talks about the crux of what we're trying to accomplish here is that as we continue to navigate not just the current endemic of COVID-19, but other potential diseases, we are remaining responsive to not just the physical wellness, but the social, emotional, or mental health wellness and the academic wellness of all of our constituents. On page 43, the first actual change that has been made to this document can be found underneath health and safety guidelines and points of consideration. And under school system-wide practices in the second bullet point there, where it says the word note, that is where the actual change comes. You are, I believe, familiar with our local community health dashboard that has reported out COVID-19 transmission levels and numbers and a variety of data. What they have added to that report as of late are updates as well in other public health infectious diseases such as influenza rates and RSV infection rates. We really appreciate public health's responsivity to this to make sure that we are aware of what's moving throughout our community, so again, that we can respond and react accordingly if need be. As you move through to the next page in your packet, you can see how we have outlined for our staff and for our students to make sure that they're maintaining typical health and well-being safety measures. We continue to implore continuous hand washing, hand sanitation, kind of typical activities to make sure that people are well, and when they are not well, we highly encourage them to stay home and to test for COVID-19, to test for influenza, to test for other things that may be passed along easily to other people in their building. So that remains part of our ongoing commitment. If you turn then to page 45 of your electronic packet, which is page 6 of this plan, there are a couple of additional additions that we have made to this plan that have been directly in response to the data and the needs of the students in front of us. We have talked at this table before about how COVID-19 has created various gaps in student learning, gaps in student social emotional health, things of that nature. And some of the additions that I'm going to read to you next are completely aligned with what the data says we need to do to make sure that we are nimble and responding to those needs and investing our ESSER dollars accordingly. In the second bullet point at the top, towards the bottom of that paragraph, there is the addition of credit recovery pathway expansion and targeted skills tutoring. Dr. Lewis has spoken before about the high dosage tutoring through the Latera company that we have engaged our elementary students in need of additional skill support in, as well as our middle level and getting into our high school students. That had not been called out specifically in the plan before. And I've continued to work with our secondary administrators about building additional credit recovery pathways for our high school kids who have fallen behind in their credits. Some of those engage students in online options. Some of it is extended school day options, summertime options, etc. So that was just not called specifically out in the plan previously. If you skip down 2 bullet points to the section that says executing a comprehensive literacy plan, some of the things that were upgraded in the second bullet point there is calling attention to the professional development around cross-curricular literacy strategies that we've engaged in under Amy Barch's direction. Just our last professional full development day was 100% dedicated to literacy, cross-curricular literacy, literacy engagement strategies, dissecting student data and that sort of thing, making sure that we have integrity in our literacy programming. Further down in that paragraph, I talked about schedule adjustments made to ensure additional time and resources are provided to targeted populations during the school day. We know from an equity standpoint that we can't just rely on time before or after school or even in the summertime, that we need to build in and adjust schedules if there are students who need daytime adjusted programming. And so at all of our levels, we've been creative around finding ways to make sure that that sort of learning can occur during the school day. And then some additional attention called to online asynchronous skill building platforms. Again, some of that is Latera, but some of it is also additional skill building software that might target math skills at the student's instructional level, language arts skills, et cetera. Next paragraph, second bullet point, the last sentence in there talks about bolstered transitional programming and expanded pathways towards graduation. That is a bit redundant, but it is necessary to make sure that our constituents are aware that we continue to try to respond to the needs in front of us. And on the last page of the packet, which is page 46 for you, the last sentence under public commentary was reworked as well to try to be more specific about that. That feedback from broader constituencies may be brought forth to administration or board members really at any time, including during school board meetings. This plan is posted publicly on our website. We want to make sure that the public has access to it, and if there are ever any suggestions that are made by our public, we would take it under consideration, obviously. We have not, and I've double-checked this with the Department of Instruction, formally surveyed our constituents beyond that initial experience when they gave us some direction on some of the ways that we should invest our dollars around mental health or academic needs, et cetera. The approach that we're using right now really aligns with what school districts are doing across the state, which is looking at internal data, making sure that people have access to our plan and nuancing it accordingly. So at this time, I will field any questions and do my best to answer them.
Any clarifying questions from board members? Seeing none, thank you. You did a wonderful job. Let's move on discussion for item 6B, which is a central pool update on electronic page 47. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lunn. I'm going to take you through this memo word by word, not so much for your benefit, but maybe for the benefit of the viewers and anybody who's watching this on playback, so they have all the information as it relates to Central High School swimming pool. And I believe all of you know that this has been offline for the past 2 seasons due to internal moisture pushing through the interior and exterior walls, causing brick displacement. Some of you were on the board several years ago. I would say 4 years ago, when we had some brick displacement coming off that 1985 addition to the building, and we didn't realize at the time that it was the pool that was actually causing that, the moisture of the pool pushing through the vapor barrier. We thought we had that reconciled with some new brickwork that was installed, but that's starting to reoccur again. So on to the second sentence in that first paragraph. While the pool itself is in working condition, it's really the vapor structure of the walls and ceiling that require mitigation. Our latest estimates come in well above $1 million, which we have not accounted for in any of our present and future projects. And I'll just digress just a little bit. All of the projects that you've seen in front of you recently, the 10 mills that generates $2.5 million a year that we bonded $1 million of, generates 14 point something million. We have a lot of HVAC work tied up in that. We've got some ESSER dollars that we're finishing up HVAC work and new windows at Ben Franklin. Lots of projects scheduled out in front of us, safety and security. If the Valley Middle School referendum, depending on how many questions are there, I mean, there's certainly opportunity for a number of projects, the Career Impact Academy, et cetera, et cetera. So back to the memo. To date, the swim teams have been practicing at UND's Hislop Pool, and Ryan might even be able to comment on that, and competing in meets both at Hislop and out of town. UND has been openly committed to taking Hislop offline effective July 1, 2024. There was some information that was shared with me today that the Wahoo Swimming Club has had a conversation with UND I know President Armacost has given me a hard stop of July 1, 2024, when that pool would be taken offline. It sounds like there could be some openness to conversation, but I don't want to speak on behalf of President Armacost, but that could tie into what we do moving forward. So at the present time, Grand Forks Park District has undergone a community study through consultants gauging the community's interest in building an aquatics and turf facility, with the latest information being 2 separate facilities. The aquatic center located, which would be located near Choice Fitness, and the turf facility, which would be located near the Alaris Center on the south side. The city has been open about extending a sales tax presently used to pay down the Alaris Center to fund a portion of those projects. The aforementioned sales extension would require public approval in the form of an election or vote likely scheduled for the fall of 2023, although no firm date has been set, so I don't want to speak on behalf of the city. So the timing of losing Hislop, if that July 1 of 2024 becomes a reality, and the uncertainty of when an aquatic center would be built if a sales tax extension is approved by the voters, puts the district at risk of not having an available pool for our swim teams, which we don't want to see happen. District Activities Director Mike Biermeyer has discussed the option of using Grand Forks Air Force Base Pool and the YMCA as a stopgap measure. However, each has its own unique inequities. Both would be for practice only, and we would compete on the road. And both do not have diving facilities, and the nearest diving tank is Crookston, otherwise known as the deep end of the pool. So to that end, I've met with financial advisors about 2 possibilities to stand up Central's pool. Over 5 years, we could finance Central's pool upgrade using a municipal lease process. Could be 5 years, could be 10, whatever we want to negotiate. Or number 2, consider an organization or a philanthropist on naming rights for the pool. And somebody is trying to set up a meeting between me and a philanthropist as well. So more to come on that information. George Hellier from the Park District and I have met to discuss the above, which includes, if an aquatic center is built, what type of lease agreement both entities would enter into and agree upon. At this time, because the operation costs of the aquatics facility are still unknown, it's really difficult to gauge what the actual costs would be. Again, if built, the aquatic center would not be available when the Hislop pool comes offline. So we don't want to project. Here's the simple way of saying it. I wouldn't want to pay more in a lease agreement with an aquatic center than what we pay for ice time for all of our skaters. And that could be the case. So, but again, numbers haven't been worked out. So for now, it would be prudent for all of us as a school district to move forward with seeking funding sources and mechanisms to reopen Central's pool. Brandon Bombach and I will facilitate that process and bring information back to the Finance Committee and subsequently to the full board once further details are fleshed out. So this is really an update. I think the good news is the community survey that came back to the Park District regarding the aquatics and the turf facility was overwhelmingly positive to extend the sales tax. So that's the good piece. The second piece is they've built into that a 25-meter pool, 10 lanes with a deep end for diving, so we could host tournaments. It's not 50 meters, but 25 would be okay, wouldn't it, Ryan? We can compete with 25? Okay. So it's just it's a timing issue. Brandon and I had a conversation today, a little bit of an update. The 1 million plus might be just a Band-Aid approach. There could be some more issues with the pool itself. What we were learning before when we had people examine the space that the pool sits in, the conversation was around, it's not a pool issue, it's the facility that encapsulates the pool. That's the issue. But since the pool has been taken offline, there could be some other valve things. I can't talk about the mechanics of all of it, but we'd want to really research and dive into that. So, you know, to take care of all the bricks, to revapor, and to do a major project, that would be probably closer to $3 million. So 1 to 3 million to get Central Pool back online. With that, I would entertain any questions, and I think my colleague Brandon might even be able to respond to 1 or 2 questions as well.
Clarifying questions or comments from board members? Go ahead, Bill.
My question, how big is Central Pool? I can't remember. Is it a 25 meter? 25 yard. Is there a diving in? There is, okay.
Other clarifying questions for Ryan? or his colleagues. Go ahead, Monty.
Well, I had no idea like what to think about the pool. I knew that it was a concern, but I swim like a rock. So I thought, well, I need to reach out to people who know. And I think of Ryan, who I know is a swimmer. So I reached out to one of the coaches for the swim teams. I wanted to know what their thoughts were regarding the letter that was in the packet. Is it better to wait for the aquatic center in their mind, or did they think fixing the central pool was really far more important? And so I asked them if I could share what they said, and they said that we definitely need the central pool to be refurbished, as we do not have any practical solutions in the region once UND closes the Hislop. We love training at UND with the quality of the facility, but it is not home. The guys comment quite often that they would prefer to be at Central, as do the coaches. We do feel a bit disconnected from Central and by association Red River. Due to this, and our access to our training equipment is difficult as well. I know we are smaller programs with less participation and fewer community spectators compared to other premier sports, but we would like to be considered to have this fixed, and it has been a complication for multiple years. So just a thought from the coaches, and maybe Ryan can expand on that. That kind of puts you on the spot, but just a thought from the coaches.
I think you talked about the Wahoos. I'm also part of that team. We have like a athlete committee that we put together, and we tried to do a couple of things. Like we did a letter to the Herald that they put in for that two or three girls on the team wrote and sent to the Herald, just like what positives it bring, not just to the swimming community, but to the community. And I think that has to be the focus, because we live in Grand Forks, North Dakota, where swimming is not the most prevalent sport. I mean, like, let's be real, if this was like a hockey rink that was getting built, I think it'd be a way it'd be a more efficient process. But like, just like what the benefits of swimming and can bring to not only children but to young adults, older adults, I think has to be really the focus, because just of the environment that we're in. So that's just my thoughts.
Other thoughts from other board members? Go ahead, Cynthia.
So I am biased because I consider myself a swimmer. I'm with a group called the Master Swimmers, and we swim. I am on the totem pole. I'm not a Will Gosnold, I will just tell you that. But I do 2,100, 2,200 yards every morning, which some people do double that, so just for the record. All right, so I did reach out to Robin Tracy, who's kind of the lead of the Master Swimmer, and she's also now the assistant coach for swimming, right? And so she sent me a fairly long email just asking if the district could really afford $1 million. She wondered if there was any opportunity for the district to talk with President Armacost about, is that firm date, could that be extended if this new facility is going to be approved? I would expect that you would have conversations about that. She asked about whether the district was thinking about allowing others to use the pool, because if it's a $1 million ask that some people would maybe support, would it be possible for other groups to use the pool? Wahoo's is not part of the school district, it's a separate club, right? Yeah. And so Master Swimmers are the same. When we had reached out to swim at Central, it's fairly expensive, like $50 an hour, plus you have to find your own lifeguard, which we don't have a problem with. Our group has at least 3 lifeguards within the group, but still, that's fairly expensive and probably would be too expensive for some of the other groups in the area. But if that's the only pool that's available for people like the Wahoos, so it's something to think about if you're going to invest $1 million, can you ask people to contribute to use the pool? I do think that we really need to get this, it's going to be here before we know it, 2024. So those were kind of her main comments. She just was worried that the longevity of even just $1 million, is that going to fix the pool? And you're going to be exploring that.
That's correct. And this would be Finance Committee, one of the agenda items on our Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, to talk about some of those options.
Go ahead, Jeff.
And this sort of fits in with Cynthia's question too. Prior, when the pool was full and it was operational, bricks were coming off. Now, did you say with the pool being offline, we're still having bricks come off of the side?
No.
No. Okay, thank you.
Let me just, if I could clarify,
Go for it.
there was like a second round of bricks coming off. That's why we shuttered the pool.
My only thoughts are, I think we need to pursue this further. I think something probably needs to be done. Do we have a concern about equity issues with, if we have one high school that has a pool and one that doesn't? At one point in our lives, we had 2 high schools that each had a pool.
Well, it's shared space. It's a night rider program for both boys and girls, or young men and young ladies. So it'd be similar to some of the other sports that are conjoined. And we all share Cushman Field. Everybody uses Cushman Field, right? So thank you for that question, though.
Go ahead.
Clarifying question about that. I think that Red River, though, it was never a 20, it's not a 25-yard pool, I don't think. So it's never been the team pool for the high schools.
It was not a competition pool.
Right.
And just to clarify, Central's pool is really big enough for a team meet of 2, right? Otherwise, it's pretty tight.
And the other challenge with Central is the locker rooms are not next to the pool. Like, they're downstairs. You go through a long hall to get to them.
But also on deck. On deck, there's like rooms. They're not really locker rooms. It's like tiny rooms. Like there's 2 of them, and then it's literally just a curtain you pull, and they all like just change in there. And also, I had another question. The Night Riders, we also incorporate like Thompson and Sacred Heart into our team. Wouldn't it like for Thompson, like they're not part of like this school board and stuff, like if they have their own school board meetings, like maybe this issue could be like brought to them too, because I know we have a couple of members on our swim team that are from Thompson, and then the girls team have a couple too, and also with Sacred Heart the same thing, and EGF as well. So I was just
Great ideas. I didn't realize we had cabanas at the Central Pool, but that's what you're describing. Any further comments from board members? If not, I think you got quite a bit of information there. So let's move on to item for discussion 6C, pre-qualified pool process on electronic pages 48 through 56. Dr. Lewis.
This is a different kind of pool, just for the record, and it was unintentional that this followed that item, just to be clear.
I do want you to know that Amber and I were both confused on Friday when we went over the agenda with Dr. Brenner. We're thinking, what's this pre-qualified pool thing? So thank you for clarifying.
Yes, no water in this one, so. All right. So the pre-qualified pool process, just a little bit of framing before I jump into the slides. Last year, we started this process, and I wasn't sure what to expect. And I was really excited when we had 18 candidates that we interviewed, and 13 were moved forward. So that was really exciting. That was for general education elementary teaching positions. However, it became very clear very quickly that we were going to be short in multiple areas, including elementary education teachers. In April of last year, I remember very vividly, we had a board that had all of the vacancies for special education. And in April, we had 30. and we had 0 left in our pools. So that kind of gave us all some cause to pause. At the same time was this pre-qualified pool. And interestingly enough, we had 4 teachers from the Philippines that happened to see our posting and apply into it. So our whole work around the international candidates actually came semi-unintentionally as a result of the pre-qualified pool process. So I just wanted to frame that a little bit for you. The purpose of our pre-qualified pool process is to develop a pool of highly qualified teachers for potential hiring. It's also an opportunity for us to screen our candidates prior to being at the building level. Also, our administrators get to interview multiple candidates during the pre-qualified pool process, and we actually get to see our candidates demonstrating lessons with Grand Forks Public School students. Last year, it was an anomaly that we had our candidates demonstrating via Zoom. This year, it has been heavily via Zoom, and that will make sense in just a little bit here. This process actually kicks off in November this year. It was November 8th, where we posted just the general vacancy. So it just said general education, elementary teacher, school year 23-24. And many folks were saying, oh, do you think that's a little bit early, Brenda? And as you will see as we go through, it was very intentional to have it placed that early to begin recruiting and really getting our folks ready for those building-based interviews. We also advertised that. Griffin and Tracy really advertised this to universities in Minnesota and North Dakota, as well as putting out to make sure our student teachers knew about the process and just really working to advertise. And I will say, which is not probably a surprise to anyone at this table, that the way that we have to market and advertise is much different than we used to. I am in my 23rd, 24th-ish year of education, and when I first started as an elementary teacher in Minnesota, there were 800 candidates for every vacancy, and that is not the case now. So just a lot more on the advertising pieces as well. We also have something called a jump list. We really want to be cognizant of the student teachers that we have in our buildings, the paraprofessionals, the designated subs, the daily subs, and any other staff members. When we begin this PQP process and they apply, as we go through the screening, I immediately tag the principal in there and say, are you willing to jump this person? And what that means is then, with the recommendation of their building level principal, they don't go through this process and they're immediately eligible for a site-based interview. And that's kind of an enticement for our folks to apply early. It also shows them, listen, we're so appreciative that you student taught with us. We're so appreciative that you want to move from a para to a teacher, that you want to move from a substitute to a contracted teacher with us. So that's an enticement as well for folks that are internal. Then we have interviews and demo lessons. So every candidate has an interview and they all have a demonstration lesson. And that's really a time for us to really see them interacting with students. Some of our candidates are in person. Most this year have been via Zoom. And then after that process, all of the folks that interviewed them and observed their lessons, including the teacher whose classrooms, the teachers whose classrooms have been used as the demo lessons, they also rank the demo lesson as well. And then based on that feedback, we move candidates forward that are ready for building-based interviews. You can see the numbers are much different than last spring when we held this. I also want to be very clear that we did not advertise this at all internationally, not at all. And you can see that our name is clearly out there as an H-1B sponsor, which I think is very, very exciting. So on December 1st, we held our first pre-qualified pool process. I thought at the time it would be our only process at Phoenix Elementary. And as you can see, we had a really representative pool, 79 applicants, and we chose 48 to interview. So we interviewed 13 domestic and 35 international. Please note that 3 domestic candidates were actually moot and did not participate in the PQP interview and demo lesson, but went straight into our immediately eligible for site-based interviews. And of the 48, we had 35 move forward, which I thought was really honestly higher than I thought that we would potentially see. And that was 12 domestic and 23 international. Then we had so many applications still coming in. And I get a little bit nervous because our vacancies are filled as they become available. So we know that right now we have vacancies available for next year, and we know that we will have them throughout the spring and likely the early summer. Last year, we had vacancies all the way into August for our elementary ed positions that we were working to fill. So we wanted to take advantage of more applicants that were coming in. We also are concerned that some of our candidates, both domestic and international, might go to school systems that hire a little bit earlier, and so forth and so on. The other piece about the international candidates is that while right now we have a favorable visa sponsorship program, that ours is a more permanent solution versus a J1, we also are seeing calls coming in to our school system from other school districts wanting to learn about our H-1B. So we know that in a good way, this is going to be something that other districts are seeing as one of the prongs to helping with where we are with staffing. On the other hand, that makes us less competitive when other districts have the same program too. So you'll see then, on January 10th, we held another process at Kelly Elementary School, and from that, we interviewed 60 candidates. And this is the benefit of this, is you have so many candidates that you get eyes on in one day there. Of this, we did have a few more no-shows than we've had in previous pools. I think when you get higher numbers, you get a few more no-shows. I will point to you, look at how much our domestic applicants dropped from the first pool to the second pool. So you're seeing what we're having here with the numbers of domestic and the number of international that you'll see. As a result of that, we had 20 candidates that were moved forward. Our next slide here shows you updated numbers. These are a little bit different because I've already had one individual, a domestic candidate, was hired for a Head Start position, so we're really excited about that. And then I do have folks that are really courteous, and they reach out and they say, you know, I got another job, I'm not ready to move internationally, those types of things too. So that's why the numbers look like this now for the number of candidates eligible for site interviews. I feel really confident in the numbers that we have now, 16 domestic, 40 international. I'm obviously not able to predict how many kindergarten and elementary vacancies that we will have moving forward. I'm not sure that we will be able to fill all of our vacancies with domestic. And just because these individuals here are eligible for site interviews does not mean that when that vacancy occurs potentially in April or May, that they'll still be available. So I think it's good that we have this mix of both domestic and international candidates. Right now, we have 5 positions posted. For elementary, 4 will close tonight, and then 1 will close on Wednesday evening. And our sites can begin interviewing after January 2023. So obviously after today, after the pools close. I wanted to shift here too to some notable pieces. We currently have 3 counselor vacancies that have been vacant for the entirety of the 22-23 school year. I did source this and did some recruiting internationally. And now we have a beautiful situation where this is actually one more than effective today, where we're up to 18 candidates that are in our elementary counselor pool, to the point that we now have to hold a PQP, which is excellent. And we have several administrators, counselors, and other district staff that will be doing the PQP at Ben Franklin Elementary. It'll be very similar for counselors as it is for teachers. We gave them grade bands of sources of strength lessons, and they'll be delivering a sources of strength lesson with Ben Franklin students and then doing the interview. I am very proud to report that our reality of the board with 30 vacancies and no applications for special ed, we now are in a place where we've already hired 5 candidates for special education, 1 domestic, 4 international. As a reminder, and I won't go too deep into this, we cannot hire internationals unless we have ensured all domestics have been vetted. So that really shows you what our hiring pools look like right now. The other piece, so we will be holding a special education PQP on March 2nd. And I sourced for school psychs and speech and language pathologists. For school psychs, we have 4 that are highly qualified, so we're excited to vet them. And then speech and language pathologists, it's very interesting. Most of the speech and language pathology pathologists in international countries other than ours require a 4-year degree. So we are really struggling to find SLPs that have a bachelor's degree, that have a master's degree. However, we have the ability to serve minutes to students with speech and language pathology assistants. They're called SLPAs. So international talent would qualify here. One of the ways that we worked to fill our vacancies this year with SLPs was through virtual SLPs. Not ideal. So we're really looking at how we can have in person. So we're very excited. I think we have 10 SLPAs that are going to be interviewed. So just a very different place we are this year than I think we were last year. And I can tell as our principals come to these PQPs, because all of them are there, and they come out of their buildings and they come and they spend the day, it just feels different. And even in my introduction, when I talk to them prior to the PQPs, I say, we have the ability to maintain high standards, and we don't have to just settle because we're so worried that we won't find another candidate. While international talent is not the only prong, we certainly don't want to end up in a school system where we have heavy on international. It is a prong that we've been able to use and continue to build on. And this, since October, our first arrival, has really proven to us the things that we're doing well in our national program. And I've personally stumbled a time or two too and learned from that and how we can enhance it. So with that, I'll entertain any questions or comments.
Questions or comments for Dr. Lewis? Go ahead.
I think this is wonderful to learn more about. As Dr. Lunn alluded to, we had some word issues we were going through, and I asked Dr. Brenner if these people got jumped and beat up, and that's why there was 3 of them. I missed the memo, so just getting used to all these terms and you explaining it is helpful. I am curious because I don't remember the answer about the H-1B visas. What is the longevity of that visa? And if we were the sponsoring entity, could one of those teachers, if they were here, decide maybe there's an opportunity in another district, and how does that work while we have them here?
Great question. Longevity of an H-1B is really So there's multiple pathways. The easiest one to explain is 3-year initial H-1B. Some get a 1-year, it just depends, but it's typically 3 years, renewable for another 3 years. And then there's also the pathway to employer-sponsored status adjustment of a green card of permanent residency. You don't have to wait 6 years to pursue permanent residency for folks that are here on an H-1B. At the same time, we do not have to extend a pathway, and it's not like overnight. We do not have to extend a pathway of pursuing a green card status adjustment on H-1Bs to every H-1B. That's on an individual basis, over time, et cetera, et cetera. Once individuals do have their green card permanent residency, they no longer need sponsorship to work for any employer in the U.S. So they would be able to pursue employment on their own outside of us. When they are here under a sponsorship of an H-1B, another district would have to approach us to see if we would transfer sponsorships to them. They would also have to go through all of the Department of Labor clearances, all of the H-1B processes. It's a pretty long and intensive process on that too. So if I was here on an H-1B, I could not apply into another school system and just go with them. We're the sponsor. We're the ones that give them the ability to work in the U.S. They would then have to work with that prospective employer to work with us to secure a transfer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think part of why I asked that question is I was curious about some of, we hear about turnover sometimes, and so I was curious about some of these pathways and the longevity that maybe we're creating in terms of paths for sustainability of teaching positions and support positions. So
this is another reason why this is a better permanent solution than a J1. As a reminder, J1's the employee seeks that, not the employer. J1s are very limited in the number that they have. The demand is huge, and they're 1 year. And there's no pathway to keeping them as a permanent employee.
Other clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Melissa.
Ooh, my butt. There we go. With speech path assistants, so do they get to have a teacher contract, or are they considered classified? And then, so if they're an assistant, I assume they can't oversee a caseload in the paperwork, and so that part of the job still has to be put on to a current speech path, am I correct?
Doesn't necessarily have to be a current one, but a licensed SLP.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. I want to go deeper into that too. So yes, kind of like a OT and a CODA, PT and a PTA. So there's also something called an SLPP. An SLPP is a 2-year associate's degree, not eligible for an H-1B sponsorship because those have to be bachelor's degree and above. SLPAs are a bachelor's degree, therefore we can sponsor, but they're not on teacher contract. So very good question. Thank you for letting me clarify that.
Other clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Monty.
Today I was working on a project at UND, and I was looking up counselors in the area for about a 45-mile radius around Grand Forks. And interestingly enough, in all of the schools around us, there were 4 schools that did not have high school counselors. I was specifically looking at high school, and 1 school that shared a counselor. And so if you have 17 candidates for a counseling position, that's probably just remarkable, because I know in our house we talk about that a fair amount, and I know last year Jeff tried to, call NDSU and called all of anybody in the NDUS system to see what kind of people they had graduating, and everybody was hired already. So that's just amazing. Thank you for all that work. Thank you.
I wanted to also follow up one more thing that Melissa prompted for me. The SLPAs, of course, are open to domestic candidates too. So we're hopeful that maybe we might find some domestic candidates in our pools, but as of now, we only have international.
I have just a quick comment and then a question. So in my profession, we have physicians that are foreign medical graduates, so they graduated from another country and they came to the U.S. The quality is excellent and unbelievable. And I can tell you our healthcare system in the U.S. would fail completely if we didn't have any of them here. People don't realize that how much support that provides, not just in Grand Forks, but throughout the country. And they're excellent physicians that take care of me on a regular basis. So just that analogy in another profession. Quick question, I think you kind of answered it, but who's involved in these interviews? Is it's all the principals, it sounded like? Are there teachers involved, or who makes up that pool that interviews these people?
Yeah, thanks for the question. For the general education pool, it's many of our individuals that are in the director unit, so Carrie Weipert, Dr. Dietrich, Tracy Johnson. We also have all principals and all associate principals, so on that day, it's really, we really appreciate all the folks in the buildings that help when the principal and AP are out across our district at the elementary level. Then we also have a lot of our instructional design coaches sign up to do that, and other district staff. So it's a wide variety. And then as far as teachers, they are involved as the host classrooms because remember, we needed 60 lessons hosted. So then they are involved in that part of the process, and they rank our candidates as well. And then for the counselor, PQP, it will be some administrators, not all, as many counselors as indicated interest that want to be a part of that, and some other district staff.
Thank you. Any further clarifying questions or comments? Go ahead, Amber.
I know when we had our initial round of international teachers come over, I don't know if I want to term it like it was the responsibility of the district, but we certainly played a role in helping to secure housing, and there was a volunteer group and a call out for donations as well. Is that going to be the norm moving forward in terms of capacity of helping with some of those things? Is that just what we do, or is it a part of sort of the structure of the program, the visa program and things like that?
Very good question. None of that is required for the H-1B program. In fact, you don't even have to pick them up at the airport. Not that that's ideal, right? But that's not required. Helping with housing is not required. None of that, and furnishings, all of that. However, we have had really good luck with guiding them. I never mandate where they live, but I guide them about, this is probably a really good option because it's on bus lines. It's, these pieces, because I think it's hard. And with me, when I was still here, but we were transitioning to live in China, it looks really great on the internet, right? The apartment looks great. It's a little bit cheaper. It's only a mile. China's pretty warm. But then you have someone step in, like the head of school, to say, that's definitely not going to be an option for you. Are you planning to get an e-bike? Those types of things. And I do the same with our candidates, where they'll say, we chose this apartment, and I'll say, so that's 0.7 miles walk to a bus stop. I guarantee you've never been in conditions like we have here in the winter. This is what it's going to look like. I'm not telling you can't live there, but I would strongly ask you to go with the district recommendations. Then as far as the donations, we still have plenty of beds, which is wonderful. We have ongoing collection of sheets and household items, pieces like that. We have 3 candidates that will all be living together, 2 for special education, 1 for Head Start, that are coming just as soon as we can, likely first week in February will be their arrival. We have plenty to still outfit them. I would envision us moving forward to continue to do that. What's going to happen is our apartments are furnished well. But I'm guessing that our international teachers will want to start buying, their own stuff, different couches, those types of things. So then we'll ask for that back so that we can bring it to our next candidates. So I anticipate it will continue moving forward. And the room at Ben Franklin has been a wonderful place to have that, and it's still just really, really well stocked. So none of that is required, but I think when we want to stay competitive in all of our facets of hiring, I think that's a definite perk.
Having interacted with some of these individuals in my day job, I think it has really set the tone for them because they talk about that. I think it just sets the tone of how important we as a district, but as a community, feel for them. So I really think it sets the tone. I would hate for that to go away.
Amber, you also talked about how it started as like a volunteer committee. That has absolutely evolved too. It's not required at all, but I'm noticing more and more as the core of us, more and more buildings are just like when their international teachers come, we'll have the things out of the donation room, but all of the staff, just out of the goodness of their heart, are giving them just wonderful welcome amenities to go above and beyond in the apartments. So it's just really nice to see how our staff just really personalize this and just what Dr. Lund said, just that warm welcome that they feel when they come, and after a 36-hour journey, they can lay their head on brand new sheets in their apartment with the heat turned up so that we show them how to use it. I do think that I'm much more looking forward to August arrivals than the December blizzard arrivals, because it is awful to move them in at 2 a.m. when it's 50 below. We've done it, but I'm excited for the August move-ins.
Any final thoughts or questions from board members? See none? Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Look forward to future updates, maybe in August. Let's move on for the last item for discussion, 6D, which is the legislative update, electronic pages 57 and 58. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Dr. Lund. This legislative session, we just concluded week 3. It's been an absolute sprint to keep track of all the bills that are being introduced. On a typical legislative session, 900-plus bills will be introduced, and they're anticipating right around 1,000. So it's just 100 more to keep track of. So, and many of them do apply to K-12 education. So I've just highlighted a couple for you for this evening, but we're tracking just a number of bills and I shared with Dr. Lund and Amber on Friday that at the drop of a hat, I'll probably be in Bismarck to testify regarding some of the bills that are being introduced, both in support and in opposition of. So first of all, House Bill 1199, Career Impact Academy funding. This has moved rather quickly, and there's really a good appetite to as you all know, we're waiting for the $10 million to come from the state to the district, so we can break ground here, but that has taken so long. The state is waiting for that federal money to land in Bismarck so they can distribute that to us. They've already put a mechanism in place where they'll just distribute some state dollars, and they will be reimbursed by the feds. But that still leaves a gap, and that inflationary gap is something that is still being discussed, introduced. We'll see more bills around that as well. And Eric Ripley has done a terrific job of getting to Bismarck and testifying on behalf of not only Grand Forks, but all the other communities who are waiting for their career academy to be built. So, and you can see Mr. Ripley's testimony is found at the link. Also, thank you to all of you who took time, if you even had time, to oppose House Bill 1251, which is known to many of us as the elimination of superintendent's bill, but it's really about local governing control. This seems like it's a precursor to start stripping away the authority that school boards have within a community, and all of you are elected officials. So appreciate all of your efforts. I know Dr. Amy Kopus, our Executive Director for North Dakota Council of Executive Leaders, along with the School Board Association, are really grateful for the stack of papers that have come in via email, and literally Amy is stacking those papers so she can hand them over to the committee. So an update on that is if the board has an appetite, to have a resolution supporting local governing control and supporting the employment of superintendents. I do have a draft for you. If you would like to take a look at that tonight, I would defer to you, Dr. Lunn, if you want to have that conversation with the group.
Well, and I guess we'll open it up. When Dr. Brenner and Amber and I met, we meet on Fridays, just so if you guys don't know that, especially to go over the agendas. We talked about that, and our North Dakota School Board Association has asked us, as various groups would, if we'd be willing to pass resolutions. So I thought it'd be worthwhile bringing it to this body for a discussion. The problem is it's time sensitive. I think testimony is being heard on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So we'd almost have to discuss it here, and if we wanted to proceed with that at this meeting, because I think if we waited 2 weeks, it'll probably be well past the time. It'll be either shot down or it'll be all the way into the other legislative sessions. So I don't know what people's thoughts are on having some discussion, potentially as a board passing a resolution opposing this bill that's in the legislative session. So I'll open it up. Go ahead.
The first question is, what would be I'm in favor of doing that, so, but this is on for discussion, so would we have to amend our agenda, or what would we do?
I think we can, as a body, if we decide to take action, we don't have to necessarily amend the agenda, but we can do the action, even though it's under discussion. Dr. Brenner's going to hand out the resolution so people can at least get a chance to look at it. Other comments I thought I saw. Go ahead, Monty.
It's been really interesting to, so on Friday afternoons, I volunteered to hang out in a Zoom with Alexis Baxley, and she's the executive director of North Dakota School Board Association, and she's very well-spoken. I think this is not her first rodeo by any stretch of the imagination. She's very calm, and she takes a very thorough approach to looking at all these bills, and she works hand in hand with Dr. Amy Kopis, right? So she talked a lot about 1251 and the elimination of superintendents, and spoke that, not only would, if we just look at the Red River Valley Education Cooperative, there are 21 schools in that cooperative. Well, it would affect 16 of those schools. So that's just here within, 45 miles of us. And apparently, if you dig into the bill, so I might say I want to partner with, School A might want to partner with School B. Well, DPI has to approve that, and DPI might not approve that. You don't get to exactly say if your school is one of the schools that close. You don't necessarily get to choose who you consolidate with. So it really does remove local control. And we're not thinking about how this will affect the tribal schools. And that was one of the things that Alexis brought up. Alexis schools, tribal schools have some of their own governances, and that would be incredibly disruptive to them. And so she just mentioned that as well. And apparently opposing the bill is also the Farm Bureau, because you have a lot of rural schools that this would affect very greatly, and that would just disrupt. A school that has 475 kids is still a viable school, and that's not saying that the school would close, but we all know that if a superintendent has to manage 4 or 5 buildings, I just can't imagine who's going to do that. And if you cap a superintendent's salary, well, who's going to apply to do that? And if that school eventually closes, we know what happens to that community then. So I just see just a humongous kind of a doomsday ripple effect, and I don't like to think of it that way, but it does. It's got a lot more negative consequences than positive things. So,
if you look at Dr. Brenner's memo on the back page, on electronic page 58, are some comments about that. And I don't know if it's listed in here, but I mean the other thing is it's just going to probably transfer some responsibility. So if you have a superintendent that's in the next school district, you can darn be sure that the principals and other people are going to have to take up those duties and stuff. So I think it's a poorly thought out bill, and I think it really this is my personal opinion, not my official opinion as president. I think this is just a precursor for forced consolidation without saying it. And I wish if that was what they wanted to do, they should have called it that. But that's my personal opinion. So, other comments from board members, thoughts? I'm letting people read it, so. Is there an appetite from the board to consider this resolution, or would the board rather not make an official stand and let us as individuals do it? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Yes, I'd be willing to make a motion to move forward with the resolution as it is written.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second so we can discuss it? Joel will second it. Okay, further discussions, thoughts, comments? Go ahead, Dave. Yes, we're sending it right now, Dave. Thank you. Amber, you had a comment or question?
My only comment with something like this is if there's a threshold of votes that we need, or if it's, just majority, like anything.
I think it's a majority of those present, which is all of us tonight. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I'll go ahead and make some comments. So when I first learned of this, I actually thought, well, it doesn't apply to the Grand Forks Public Schools, so I'm not going to get too involved. So I appreciated the bullet points that came kind of explaining, why we should care. And I think you already said this. I think deep down it is control and what they're looking for that we should be concerned about. The other comment, and this would be a personal comment. I was disappointed that we had a couple members here in Grand Forks that had supported or helped put together the resolution. Partly because we are a large district, and I see that kind of as meddling in some of these other districts that are much smaller. That's just my personal opinion.
I have to apologize. I didn't realize I thought the back part of the memo was about this. It's not, so sorry to confuse you all. Dr. Brennan, I just want a quick question. Did anybody from our local legislators or did anybody reach out to you before this was introduced or ask your thoughts or opinions about this?
No, not prior to, but I did reach out to all of our legislators. I had a separate letter for our two local legislators who were sponsors of the bill. Sent them a separate type of memo, and then asked our others to vote in opposition. I will say that I did hear responses from many. Senator Scott Meyer was one of the sponsors of the bill, and he did respond to me quite professionally, and he said he's dug into more of the details, and I think he has some further thoughts and some reconsideration. So he said, just because I'm a sponsor on the bill doesn't mean that I would vote in favor of a bill. So that was reassuring for me.
Yeah, he said, I wrote to him, and he said the same thing to me, Dr. Brenner, exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm.
Amber, go ahead.
One of my concerns with this bill was the limit on number of individuals at a school. And so we share a superintendent with the air base, and it did say that those would sort of be lumped together in numbers. But, my thought was if this passed, then what's next? Would that be split up, and then the base would have to just be on their own as a school, or, so it just seemed like one more step could happen. And so I certainly want to protect that relationship that we have with the small school and the air base as well.
Any further comments about anybody that hasn't spoken? Any further final thoughts? Seeing none, so the motion is to approve the resolution as outlined. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. And now to the second page of the memo that I was so confused you all on. Dr. Brenner?
Well, that's okay. First bullet, there's a number of property tax relief bills are being introduced. Most of them are tied to the per pupil payment, and like I said, if history repeats itself, the final version of that will be the final day, the final hour, probably at 3 a.m., and all of us will be standing in a room trying to get what we believe we deserve. The second bullet, the Grand Forks legislative position on per pupil funding increase is 8% in year one, 8% in year two. Again, while not coordinated, this is consistent with North Dakota United. We're trying to build in some inflationary things. We know that no matter what all of the districts get in North Dakota, we still need to compete with our friends to the south and our friends to the west. So we want to do better than whatever they end up with during bargaining or negotiations. The governor's budget called for 4% in year one, 3% in year two. There's been another bill introduced at 4 and 4. I'm still optimistic that it might be better than that. And so we'll talk a little bit about this at our Finance Committee meeting on Thursday as well. We're monitoring the TFFR and PERS retirement fund. There certainly seems to be a large appetite in Bismarck to change a pension, which is one of the largest attractions to our profession, is there's a guaranteed pension. And they would like to see this as a guaranteed or defined contribution rather than a pension. I don't know if I've said it at this table before. I probably said it privately to some others, but my parents are retired educators. My father is 93. My mother's not too far behind. And they have benefited from the TFFR and PERS system. And I kind of joke with them that they're part of the problem and why the funding, why that mechanism isn't so solid right now. So we can at least laugh about that. And I just thought I would add that little piece. We're monitoring any bills related to vouchers. There are some bills that are disguised as vouchers and some less disguised. And we're also monitoring a bill that's been introduced about DPI taking over low-performing schools. And we would be concerned about that. And on a brighter and lighter note, I'm really happy to report that Representative Dr. Mark Sanford, former superintendent here, along with Representative Eric Murphy, are working on a weighted factor bill as it relates to special education. That was one of the priorities that we shared with our legislative assembly when we met here several weeks ago. And actually, Dr. Sanford asked the question that evening: "What are you looking at? You know, how would you like that weight to change?" Brandon worked some numbers and looked at really the costs for some of our high need students. And if this were to go through, this would be terrific news for our school district on top of any of the other foundation aid increases. So thanks to Brandon for working with Representative Murphy and Dr. Sanford on that. And that's what I have, other than there's a whole bunch moving around my head when I go to sleep each night.
So TFFR is not under attack this year in the legislature, just PERS is, which is affecting UND, but there is the fear that if they get rid of PERS, then they will later come after TFFR, but what we're being told is TFFR is funded right now. They kind of fixed the problem a few years ago, but it's just PERS under attack this legislative session.
And just to maybe add to Melissa's comments, there are backdoor conversations about TFFR, so it could make its way into a bill.
Any further clarifying questions or comments for Dr. Brenner about legislative update? Monty, do you have anything else?
So thank you. Yeah, it's super interesting to hear about all that. And when we meet for an hour, she goes through a bill like every 2 minutes and gives us a little update. It is, your head must just spin if you're in Bismarck. In terms of the PERS bill on Friday, apparently 2 bills, they're being heard this week. They must have dropped a while back, but House Bill 1486 is from Representative Casper, and he wants to, of course, move PERS from a defined benefit to a contribution plan, right? So then Representative Josh Boucher from Fargo introduced Senate Bill 2239, which of course pays for the plan. And so, let the fun begin, right? And maybe you've already heard about that. One thing we might want to watch for, House Bill 1163, which is a new graduation track, which would include 3 CTE credits, one by earning industry certification. And there's literally comments in there where parents would have to sign off on industry certification. One career and technical unit can be earned by completing an industry certification within a career and technical education course. There is also House Bill 1398 relating to mandatory computer science and cybersecurity instruction and minimum requirements for high school graduation. So some interesting bills are coming, but yeah, like Dr. Brenner said, they think they are going to see more bills this session than in a lot. And Alexis talks about how oftentimes a person on one side of the aisle will introduce a bill that's exactly the same as a person on the other side of the bill, or the other side of the aisle, and then she just kind of sits back and watches them go after it. And apparently there are a lot of like same bills, but introduced by, different people from different parties, and neither bill will get a pass, kind of. So it's apparently quite interesting to be watching. So anyway, thank you. If you have comments about bills, she oftentimes will ask what our school boards would prefer, or do we have recommendations or comments, or is there anything that they want to know? So if you know of anything, not that you can't email her yourself, but we always meet on Fridays at 3, and I'm happy to relay any comments that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to superintendent recommendations for action. 7A is the consent agenda on electronic pages 59 through 72. Do I have a motion and a second? Motion by Josh. Do I have a second? Second by Cynthia. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. 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 Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Let's move on to 7B, which is general fund financial statement, electronic pages 73 through 82. Brandon.
Yeah, Dr. Lund, members of the board, this is our monthly general fund update here. Financial statement from period of July 1, 2022 through December 31st, 2022. So that's the first 6 months. Gives us a good look at just where we've been headed so far. General fund revenues were just over $52.4 million, whereas the expenditures were just over 46.1. And that gives us the excess of revenues over expenditures of $6.2 million. Just to kind of walk through those, add a little bit of context to those. The first report is you note, is our general fund financial statement. The second is a comparison as where we were at this point in time when compared with the year prior. So just at the high level, first page 74 of the electronic packet, you can see that local sources are only 6% into the bank. This is typical as people will pay their property tax early in the year, and so they will come in after your taxes are due. Whereas the state sources do come at the upfront, which is something that is welcomed, of course. 2/3 of those are in by design. And the federal sources come throughout the year as they are expenditures that are reimbursed, and so we apply for reimbursement throughout the year to bring those in. On the salary side, you can see, just on the expenditures, the big buckets of salary, fringe benefits, other expenses, utilities. We're tracking what we'd expect to be, just with a little bit more, or a little bit less in some categories as positions have gone unfilled, whereas you'll see a little bit more into the substitute category, which would help us overcome some of those shortages. Moving on to that second report, that's starting on page 77 in the electronic file. This is where you can see in that first column the 22-23 actual expenses, that's this year, as compared to where we were at this point the year prior. And it kind of makes some comparison. As you go down, I've made a couple of notes that correspond to that dialog box. Just a couple of items worth noting here. Items like our purchase services under other expenses on page 79 of your electronic packet. is up due to increased ESSER dollar expenditures. You'll see also that fourth item noted of legal services is up considerably. Of course, that's a celebratory story because that is directly related to some of the assistance we receive in bringing our international talent to our district. And the last three, as always, of the portion of the packet is just a graphic representation of where we're headed. The first being of expenditures. You can see of the three bars that are stacked next to each other for any month, the furthest right is this year, the middle is last year, and the furthest left is 2 years prior. And you can see that the expenditures are down or even, whereas the revenues on the next page, page 81 of the electronic packet, are up, and culminating in the final slide here of your board packet, page 82, is the general fund balance, which is currently sitting just under $15 million. So we are on a good path here at this point in the year. Happy to entertain any other questions. And if I could get back up, the administrative recommendation is to accept and approve the general fund financial statements for the period July 1 through December 31.
Clarifying questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, do we have a motion and a second to approve the general fund financial statement? Moved by Bill. Do we have a second? Second by Jeff. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you, Brandon. Let's move on to item 8, which is other announcements. Dr. Brenner.
No announcements.
Ms. Glatch.
Yes, I was trying to get the correct details. I'm sorry if I triggered an audio. I don't know if anybody heard it, but the All City Orchestra Festival is this Thursday night at Red River High School. It's a great event that includes all of our schools and the orchestral students that participate, and they bring in a guest speaker who has a history working with the Trans-Siberian Electric Orchestra. So it's really a fantastic event. So if you can come, please do. Check it out.
Thank you. Dr. Lewis, any announcements? Melissa, got any announcements? Okay. 8B, board requests for future consideration. Do you have any board requests? Go ahead, Cynthia.
Maybe an update at some point on child nutrition. It's in the news a lot, so people ask questions about it. I just think it's good to kind of get a handle on our free and reduced and how they're doing with that whole process.
Okay, thank you. Other board requests? Go ahead.
Just to add to that, I think learning more about the options that we have available, especially in regards to healthy choices, fresh produce, and then how would I term this? Like, a student doesn't want something, how can we give it to those who do? So like community grab bowls, essentially. I know we've kind of talked about those before, but I know there's some districts that will like package some things up and send them at the end of the day or things like that. So maybe just options for healthy eating and then preventing food waste and giving food to those who need it.
Okay, thank you. 8C, school board norms. How did we do, Amber?
I think we did great. We're a little over time today, but so 97.5.
You can grade the president for that and not the rest of the board. So we are adjourned. Have a good evening.